Well, thanks for the sadness there. Thanks. I was going to tell a joke, but that's not the appropriate time right now. I have a brother, and I mean this. I have a brother in Portland, Oregon. I have another one right over there. That's my brother, and I love you, Andy. What's funny is about 6 months, 4, 5, 6 months ago, Kyle comes up to me at Stonegate and says, "Hey, would you like speaking at our the men's group that we have here?" And what's funny is about 20 years ago, I got this really quick story I need to tell you that. 20 years ago, we had a men's group here at First Baptist that we used to speak at, all right? And I helped kind of lead that. I was a member at First Baptist. And this one particular day, and the reason why I tell you the story is because it happened in this very room. And I know some of the guys that are here probably remember this story. I get a call from the youth minister and the missions minister that morning. Said, "Hey, we got a family in town that they're from Jakarta, India, whatever. They're missionaries. Are coming in town, and I'd like to know if you'd like to let them speak for about 5 minutes or give some kind of presentation at your men's group luncheon." So I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So we have this little men's group. It's not near as successful as this one, and as you hear the story, you'll understand why. So I said, "Yeah, have them show up at 11:30, whatever, and we'll let them give them about the first 5 minutes." So we show up. There's about 30 guys in here. We're getting ready. I'm about to go up to give an introduction for the speaker, and I haven't seen the family from India or wherever they're from. And all of a sudden, when I get up to start speaking, the youth minister comes in with 2 young girls. Okay, and he's waving it back, going like, "This is the presentation." All right. So they start coming up, and I don't know their names. I don't know what's fixing to happen. It's one of those things where you're fixing to hand a microphone to somebody, and you're terrified. Kind of like probably what Kyle and Andy and Mark and all those feeling right now with me. And literally, they get up and they yell out their names. They pull out a boom box. They take off this windsuit, and beneath the windsuit is leotards and foo-foo dresses, and they inform us that they're going to do an interpretive dance. Let me say it again, an interpretive dance at Midland Get Down First Baptist Church with 30 guys looking at them. And I've got about 20 guys looking at me going, "Are you serious? Are you kidding me?" And so they dance to something that sounded kind of like Van Halen's "Running with the Devil" or something. I don't know. And they dance for probably about 3-4 hours, and it seemed like. And everybody is just, like, "I can't believe this is dead silence." And I'm trying to figure out how to get underneath the tile and worm my way back to the. And I'm sitting there, and they ended up leaving, and right before they left, and I'm looking over, and I think it was Dingler, but I'm not sure which one it was because that whole thing was fuzzy. But I think it was Dingler. And I look over at him, and he's as white as that table right there. And right there at the end of their dance, I lean over to him. I lean over to Dingler and I go, "We're going to jail. We're going to jail." So 2 weeks later, the men's club of Midland First Baptist gets disbanded, and a week after that, Dingler and Stallings and Deck, McLaughlin, Barker, myself, we get excommunicated from First Baptist, and we start Stonegate. So that's how Stonegate started. That's a true story, except for the excommunication part. That's a true story. No, Kyle a while back asked me to speak, and I said, "Absolutely, Kyle, I'd love to." And so for about 3 or 4 months, I, kind of started preparing this, the man and his mission and business and being a Christian man, and kind of my story and my testimony, and kind of weaving that in. And honestly, guys, if I told that story half of you guys would probably walk out of there going, well, that was just a colossal waste of $20 in an hour and a half. And amazingly, God probably had the same thought, because God changed that story about 2 weeks ago, which is just perfect timing, because I now had only 2 weeks to kind of prepare this. But 2 weeks ago, I find myself at the Bank of America, right here over off of Garfield, on a Saturday morning. I'm fixing to put something in my safety deposit box. And there is I'm sitting down waiting to go in to the safety deposit box area. And there's a young man that comes in, probably in his mid-30s, with his son, probably 8, 9-year-old boy. And they sit down right next to me, and the man's on his phone, and he's doing something, and the little boy's on a phone or some kind of electronic device, and he's listening to something. I don't know, it's video or whatever. And I'm not really paying attention to it. And then all of a sudden, the most horrific language you could ever imagine starts coming out of that, this little toy of his or whatever, this video. I mean, sailor blushing language, all right? And I look over at the father, and I look at the boy, and I'm not lying, this is what the father did. The father's on his phone. Here's that awful language, and the father does this. That is it. And the boy looked at it, and literally two hits on the volume, which did nothing, changed the volume. So I start looking at this little boy, and he starts looking at me. And we start speaking telepathically to each other. All right? And he's telling me, yeah, that's right. I'm still listening. I'm still watching it. To which I replied telepathically, yeah, that's right. And you're going to be wearing an orange jumpsuit with a Midland County on the back of it. Here's the deal, guys. That's kind of funny, but that's tragic. And I'm a prophet, because that's probably going to happen. And that's going to happen because a father, did this. So the next day and a half, I'm sitting there rolling around, I'm ranting mentally and emotionally about what the heck is going on with our society. What is happening? And I immediately go to this story about African bull elephants. And you're probably going, okay, now how do you skip from that to Africa? Let me tell you. Okay. So a long time ago, I was reading I think it was National Geographic, about African bull elephants. And some scientists had gone in there to do some studies on the African bull elephant herds. And what they were seeing was the African bull elephant herds were just going crazy. They were fights among the herd of the elephants. They were getting much more aggressive than they normally do, and they were getting closer to humans and becoming much more aggressive to humans. And when they went in there and they discovered this, which I think was extremely interesting. They discovered, because of poaching, of hunters going out there and killing the old African bull elephants, the older ones for the big tusks, that there were no older, wiser African bull elephants to keep chaos from taking place within the herd. Does that sound kind of interesting? Does that seem kind of like what maybe our problem is? And so I'm sitting there going, we got a problem, and we have a problem because we have men that are not being men. And there's a verse that I really like. It's in 1 Corinthians 16:13. It says, "Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Act like men, that word, act like men, comes from the Greek word, let me make sure, androzomai. It's the only time it's listed in the Bible. That word, that Greek word, means actually kind of an adjective, to act like a man, play like a man, fight like a man. Be a man. It's like when you played sports, if you played sports and your coach is like imploring you, guys, you got to act like men. You got to be like a man, all right? And so I'm sitting here looking at this and thinking, what kind of, in God's Word, that we can glean on a man that is the type of man that we need to be, position ourselves like. So I started looking at the scriptures, and I came up with a man that we're going to talk about here just for a few minutes. 4 points that would be kind of interesting about this man. But this is a man in the Bible that you wouldn't necessarily go right towards. All right? His name is Joseph, Mary's husband. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, not a whole lot of verses about Joseph. He's not the main character in that whole gig. Okay, it's mainly Mary. And what's amazing is when you start thinking about it. Number one, there are a number of verses that you can glean a lot of information about the character of Joseph. Number one. Number two, if you understand Jewish culture and the way the Jewish man especially fits within society and with his family, then you can also glean some information. But the thing that makes it important to me when I look at this, and I kind of step back from this, I said, here's the deal. We focus on Mary, and not to demean or make it sound like that we're not think of the wonders of the virgin birth, and that how God probably in his due diligence tried to find and make sure that the perfect woman would be the woman of his son. But guys, I can't help but think that God used the same due diligence to find the man that was going to raise his boy. And that's what he is. I mean, we don't hear a lot, but you can take what's going on in the scriptures and understand there was a great interaction and a relationship between Joseph, the man, and Jesus, his boy. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of take off that and go there, but not just look at it from fatherhood, but just look at it what Joseph was like the man. All right, so the first thing we look at is Joseph was a man of honor. It says that Joseph was a righteous man. In the book of in the Gospels, both Luke and Matthew talks about Joseph being a righteous man, a man of honor, and we first see that in how he dealt with Mary. The whole conversation, how that probably went down of Mary going like, Joseph, got a little news, current events here I need to let you in on. I'm pregnant. Kind of surprised me too. I'm still a virgin, hadn't been with a man, but gosh, understand it's, the angel said, I am going to be the mother of the Son of God. I mean, just think about how that conversation went, okay? Because if I would have been Joseph, my response would have been something like, and I'm Elijah, and you're going to heaven on a chariot of fire. And the flight leaves in about 30 minutes. You think about what Joseph had to endure, and what the Bible says is, no, Joseph wanted to put Mary away honorably. The law was very explicit. You had to divorce. When you were betrothed back then, that was the same thing as marriage, except that there wasn't a physical consummation of the marriage. But if you ended the marriage during the betrothal, you had to go through the divorce. And a divorce in this type of situation was really not just a divorce, it was an execution. Because they would have gotten divorced and then Mary would have been executed for unfaithfulness. All right? And so what Joseph was going to do was he was going to put her away honorably, essentially divorce her quietly and put her into another village or whatever. And then she would live out the rest of her life with her son in shame and humiliation. Okay? But Joseph didn't do that. All right? And here's the other thing that kind of mulled around in my brain when I was thinking about this. We think about what happened. Well, the angels came to Joseph and said, no, it's really true. And that makes it all easier to accept. Yeah, okay, well, the angel said. Okay? Well, the angel said. Well, you know what? The rest of the people, they didn't hear the angel. And Joseph ended up having and decided, as the honorable and full of integrity, to go ahead and marry her, even though everybody else didn't hear the angel. Didn't understand that actually was the Son of God. And trying to figure out the rumors, the whispers, speaking behind the walls about, do you really believe Joseph is doing this? Joseph went through that period as well of humiliation, but he stuck with her because he was a man of honor. So the thing that we see right now, we see in our country is we talk about there's no one in leadership that has honor. There's no one in leadership that has integrity. And you probably look at the news and you listen to blogs and read the papers and whatever, and you probably go, you know what, you're right. There isn't. But here's our problem, guys. Our problem isn't that we don't have leaders with honor and integrity. The problem is we down on the lower rung, we don't have enough men that have honor and integrity. Because if we did, we wouldn't put up with that. We would be the men of honor. We would be the men of when a yes is a yes and a no is a no. And when you do the right thing, regardless of the consequences, that would be the fabric that runs through us. And so Joseph was that kind of guy, and that's the kind of guy that I strive to be, that I want my boys to be, is men of honor and men of integrity. The second thing we look at when Joseph was a man that loved his wife and protected his wife. We see that right there with this last story that I just told. He could have divorced her and had her killed, but he protected her. He protected her emotionally from humiliation, and he protected her from being killed because of what he decided and was led to do. But secondly, you look at, there was numerous accounts in the New Testament of him taking Jesus and Mary, going down to Egypt when Herod was going to look at killing off all the males in the region. And then the angel, when he was down in Egypt, telling Joseph to head on back, that it's safe now. And as he was going back, realizing that Herod's son was still in power, so he, instead of going to the one area he was living in, ends up going to Galilee and living in Nazareth. And the key point here is, and it reminds me of a phrase that I heard a long time ago, is, as men, we are our wives' dragon slayer. I love that. Man, we're the dragon slayer. When the dragon comes to your front porch, your wife, your family can count on you to slay that dragon. Whether that dragon is financial problems or health problems or relationship problems. Your wife needs to know and understand without a shadow of a doubt that regardless of whether you're encapsulated with fear, you're going to confront the dragon and you're going to slay it. And I want to be a man like that. I want to be a man that's counted on as, when it's time to get in the fight, I'm ready to get in the fight. And your wife, understanding that and knowing that, makes her even that much more appreciative and loving of you. So Joseph was a man that loved his wife and protected her. Number 3, Joseph was a man that loved and led his children. What's really interesting here is Jesus was not Joseph's son. Okay? Joseph didn't even have any kind of physical relations with Mary until after Jesus was born. Yet Joseph raised that boy like his son. And you look at the things that went on in that time frame. The actual rule of law was that a man was responsible for the actions of his boy up to the age of 13. It's where we get bar mitzvahs from. So up to the age of 13, if a boy did something, that man was legally responsible for that. Now think about that. As a father, the actions of my boys or my sons or my children fall upon me until they reach a certain age. Well, what am I going to do? What are you going to do? Well, you're going to make sure that they're raised in a way that's not going to fall upon become problematic. But the other thing that I really got struck with, and it resonates with me, and I'll tell you why, is the relationship that Joseph had with Jesus from a professional, if you will, basis. What was Joseph? He was a carpenter. What was Jesus? He was a carpenter. And guys, that resonates with me. You know why? Because my dad was a carpenter. My dad was an architect. But he was a builder. So guess who else was a builder? From the time I was 8 years old in Arizona, I would, all the summers, up till the time that I literally went off to college, I worked with my dad. When I wasn't playing sports, and there was times, weekends or whatever, I was working with my dad out there on jobs. And here's the wonderful thing about that. You spend that much time digging a ditch with your dad, you're going to find out about your dad. You spend enough time laying tile or on a roof, putting shingles up on a roof, you're going to find out about who he is. And the wonderful thing that I gleaned from my father when growing up was, yeah, he taught me how to do some of those things, but he taught me a lot more. He taught me how to deal with stress, how to deal with people, how to deal with conflict, how to work hard, how to be loyal. Those are things that you understand and you figure out when you're spending hours and hours and hours out there with them. And you know what? Jesus got that from Joseph as well. It says in the scriptures that Jesus grew in stature and wisdom and in favor of God and men. I mean, we got this picture that, well, you know, Jesus, by the time he was a baby, he could do everything. No, Jesus was 100% God and 100% man. And Joseph, his stepdad, not his real dad, loved him and taught him and was with him. Now, we have a hard time kind of understanding or putting that into practice because of our jobs. You know, a lot of times, you know, most of us aren't in construction, so you can't haul your kid out there and say, here, let's dig this ditch. But let me give you this one example of a way that you can, all right? And it's in your kid's education. That's a big topic around here right now, but it's in your kid's education. Fellas, here's the deal. It's not your wife's responsibility to make sure that your kid gets good grades. It's not your wife's responsibility to make sure that their homework is done. It's not your wife's responsibility to make sure that the counseling sessions at the school are set up and that she goes and finds out what's going on. That's your responsibility. I found that out at a pretty early age, and I've got two boys right here that will probably attest to this. That I was the one that would get online and find out what their grades were. I was the one that would get online and find out when. Here is a perfect example of a conversation at our dinner table. To boy 2 or 3, they're right here. Hey, son number 2, Chase. I see that you have a history test this Friday. Yeah, I mean, I'm ready. Hey, that's great. That's good. Good deal. I've noticed that you haven't had your book here at the house lately. Well, I'm studying at school. Hey, that's great. I'm glad that you're using time management wisely, because that'll help you out when you get older. You do realize, though, that the final grade of that test, since I haven't seen you study here, has to equal or be better than the mean average of the water temperature of the Gulf of Mexico in July. Yeah. I realize that. Okay. Because if it isn't, Dad's going to open up a can. And you know what kind of can that is? Yes, Dad, I do know what kind of can that is. Okay. All right. We're just making sure. All right. See, we, as a male, if we get involved in our kids' education, it says two things. Number one, it says to the kid, to your son, your daughter, whatever, I'm serious about your education. And I'm not going to put up with a lot of jacking around, number one. Number two, it says to the educators, the teacher, the coach, I'm serious about my kid's education. I'm not going to put up a lot of jacking around. So when you're up there at the school, and when you're up there talking to the teachers, and when you're up there talking to the administrators, they realize that real quick. So there's a tangible way, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are like that, but there's a tangible way to get involved with your kid in a way that they understand that you love them and you mean well for them. Lastly, real quick, Joseph was a man of faith, and he lived it. You know, we see in this that Joseph, in Scripture, of 3 or 4 or 5 occurrences where he was at the temple. He was, at the temple. He took Jesus to the temple, Mary, where, on the 8th day he was circumcised. Jesus was circumcised, and then he took him to the temple where it talks about where Jesus and Mary and Joseph, they saw the old guy Simeon, who wanted to see the Messiah before he died, and Anna the prophetess, and things like that. The point being was Joseph was a man that led his family in worship. And here's the deal. This is the thing that strikes me as something that I think sometimes we, probably not you, but some of us in society, we kind of push that off sometimes to the women. Well, let them read them the Bible stories. Let them understand the tenets of the Bible or of Sunday school. No. You need to send them to Sunday school with you. You need to show them how to worship with you. You need to teach them the Word from you so that they see that. Because you know what? God holds you accountable for that. Not accountable whether they accept it. That's going to be on them. But He holds you accountable to make sure that you've exposed them, that you've introduced them, and that they know truth, and that they know the law, that they know love, and they know the Lord. And I look at it from the standpoint of, I've got a job to do to bring my kids and to bring my family in a place where they know what it's like to worship the Lord. Not because I take them, not just because I take them, not just because I show them, but the way I live. And that my life and that my walk equals my talk. And Joseph was like that. Let me close with this real quick. This really all comes down, these 4 points of Joseph. You know, look at it. He was a man of honor. He's a man that loved and protected his wife. He's a man that led his children. He's a man that lived out his faith. It's really a question of being a man and being a leader. And when I was 18 years old, literally about a week before I went off to college, my grandfather, who is a man that I adored. I mean, I was the oldest grandson. I was his, namesake. And we had a wonderful, great relationship. And he took me to lunch one day, right before I went off to college. And he was a man's man. I mean, he was in law enforcement. He was a rough, tough. I mean, he was a man. And he sat me down. We had a burger. And he told me a couple things. He said, Larry, he said, first of all, he goes, I'm going to tell you how much I love you, how proud I am of you. And hearing this from my grandfather I knew he did, but you just didn't hear him say that all that much. And he said this, and I'll never forget this. He said, I want you to understand something. He goes, your last name prohibits you from being a follower. So you get out there and lead. And that was my legacy. Your last name, the name of that legacy of Eldon Gilbert, my grandfather, prohibits you from being a follower. So you lead. So here's my charge, guys. And for those of y'all know me, I love sports analogies. I love war analogies. I'm going to end on a war analogy. As a man, we all have our hill. We have our hill that we have to take. And we have our hill that we're supposed to protect, and we're supposed to honor, and we're supposed to fortify, and we're supposed to defend. Okay? So take the hill. And I know right now you look out there among the society and you're thinking, man, I'm surrounded because the enemy is taking a lot of hills right now. Men are not taking their hills. But that's not our job to look around. Our job is to take our hill and to lock arms with those that take hills with us. And at the end, knowing that our prayer is to be like Joseph, be a man of honor, live honorably, love, cherish, and protect your wife, lead your children, and live your faith. God bless you.